Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? As I'm filming this, Nintendo Switch has not come out yet, and despite the fact that it's sold out of its pre-orders, the overall impression on the internet is that it's still going to fail. That just leads me to wonder, how did an opinion like that form on a product that hasn't even been released? This topic was suggested by one of my followers on Twitter, and it was basically worded along the lines of, what do I think the impact is going to be on Switch given the negative impressions from journalists and gamers? I think the impact can be fairly profound, but it may not necessarily be why you think. So let's talk about what that impact could be and where it's coming from. I should note that while this video is kind of framed around the context of Nintendo Switch, it doesn't really apply just to it. We've seen this a number of times before with other products and other scenarios. In this case, Switch just happens to be a pretty relevant and recent example. It's fresh in the mind, so it's easy to use as a basis for comparison to talk about. But by no means am I trying to sit here and just pick on Switch. So before you go nuts in the comments, just think about that. The way Switch has kind of come out so far, the information about it and everything is, it's been a few phases. You know, we got that original teaser trailer towards the very kind of the fall of 2016, and then we got the 1 hour or so long like video presentation this winter from Nintendo where they go into more detail about the console. And after each one of those came out, the gaming press, the tech news industry, you know, what have you, various outlets like that, came out with stories about that. It's newsworthy information about a console that people, I think, are legitimately curious about or anticipating, given especially what happened with Wii U. So it makes sense for there to be articles about the console and any news that, you know, happens to be coming out regarding it. And all of those pieces, because those people writing the stories, and I'm a little hesitant to use the word journalist because they aren't necessarily always journalists. Sometimes they're bloggers or somewhere in the continuum in between. But in any case, the people writing those stories, all the more information they really had was the same information that anybody who watched those videos would have. And those articles tended to take one of two forms. They were either along the lines of just a very simple, straightforward, almost bullet point list of what you missed factually if you didn't watch that video. Things like, you know, how much it's going to cost, when it's released, what comes in the box, that sort of thing. And the other type of article that came out was along the lines of a bit more opinion, offering some conjecture as to what the information presented in the video may actually mean. You know, trying to fill in between the lines, extrapolate on what Nintendo may not have said about that product. And it's that second piece, that second type of article that I think is where a lot of the opinion about Switch so far has really come from. This, of course, is nothing new. We see this with other topics as well when there's a newsworthy thing going on and people want more information about it. In order to understand why pieces like that exist, we almost need to back up a little bit. Opinion pieces have always been around, right? I mean, there's an entire section of traditional newspapers dedicated to opinions. But that's kind of the key, in that in traditional newspapers, the opinions are put in a specific section. You have to seek them out. They don't mix opinion pieces in with news articles on the front page, that sort of thing. Opinion pieces are generally very clearly called out as being opinion pieces. And so when you go into it, you're kind of taking everything with a grain of salt. You're going into an article like that knowing it's an opinion piece, and the information or argument presented in that piece may not necessarily be one that you agree with. So you kind of mentally prepare yourself and don't really so much absorb all the information and internalize it, but rather be a little bit more thoughtful about it, perhaps. And sometimes even newspapers will run opinion pieces right next to each other that argue different sides of of a point, where you may have someone in favor of a certain thing, and the next article right next to it is somebody who's against that same thing. So you can kind of get both perspectives and really come to your own conclusions. With the rise of online news and tech journalism and professional blogging and all that, just the format of getting that information online has really strayed from the way that newspapers always did it in print, in that they're publishing constantly all day. It's not a scenario where they're going to upload all their articles for a day in one shot, say first thing in the morning, and then not do anything the rest of the day. They come out periodically as new information becomes available, as the stories get written. And they don't really necessarily will section off articles like that. I mean, sure, you can search based off of topic and keyword, and they kind of sort things like that. But the newest articles just show up at the top of the main page. And opinion pieces get mixed in with longer kind of retrospective types of articles or investigative articles, and also get mixed in with just little short, very timely news articles. And I think the problem is people don't necessarily understand or recognize the differences between those. They don't necessarily go into an opinion article realizing this is really an opinion article. Is that a problem? Well, I think it can be. And it's not so much an issue about tech journalism and the way it works. I mean, obviously all of that stuff had to evolve just as part of the way media is. It had to evolve in order for media to survive on the internet. Could they do a better job trying to, flag those articles and make them more obvious as being opinion pieces? Yes. But I think the real thing comes down to human psychology. Humans love stories. They love telling stories. They love kind of letting their minds go and reading in between lines and filling in blanks. We have this thirst for knowledge, whether we actively recognize it or not. And when we're only given a small piece of information about a larger, broader topic, where do our minds naturally go? They want to fill in those blanks. And so we gravitate towards information that fills in those blanks. I mean, that's why things like conspiracy theories exist. That's just one way that humans have tried to cope with a lack of information in, when there's been a desire to fill that in, people just need to have kind of this mental completion, this conclusion. They need to know it all, and they need to know it all now so that they can have the full picture. And it's frustrating when that information isn't available, right? When you have to wait for it. So opinion pieces like that, where they try to fill in the lines and say, well, we don't know really for sure about how this is going to be, so we're just going to kind of guess or extrapolate based on previous information, or sometimes they fill in their own bias or personal opinion. That can then kind of fill in those gaps for other people. When people don't necessarily have good alternate sources for information that fills in gaps like that, they just tend to kind of go with what they've got. So if someone, offers a piece of information that fills in a gap, whether that information is right or wrong, a lot of times people will just go with it. Now, you may just be sitting there going, Colin, but everybody is saying Nintendo Switch is weird and underpowered and all these things. And, well, I think that speaks to the whole kind of echo chamber concept that the internet really seems to exemplify. In that when one person runs an article with information in it, a lot of other people, in their desire to publish quickly, that competition aspect to it, well, they're maybe just going to regurgitate the same info. Original research and all that really seems to be kind of shrinking these days. It really seems to be where one publication comes out with a news story, or a news-like story, and in the guise of competition, trying to get their own articles published as fast as they can, other outlets may just pretty much copy that article. They'll rewrite it in their own words, but they won't necessarily go back to the original source and try to seek out that source information to confirm that that article was reporting it correctly. So it's kind of like playing a version of the telephone game where, what the person at the beginning says is nothing like what the person at the end says. And people on web forums and social media and the comments even of articles like that can twist things around even more, because while we're really good at remembering larger concepts, a lot of times smaller details get lost on us. And those smaller details can sometimes make a big difference. And so we again just turn into kind of, the making things up as we go, I guess, is a way to say it. So here's a great example. The online component for Nintendo Switch is going to be optional, and you have to pay for it. It's not going to be free online play like it was with the Wii U. And that kind of struck people funny. In some ways it makes sense, but in other ways people don't like that. And I saw a lot of people freaking out about that announcement. Why were they doing that? Why were they freaking out? Well, in a lack of further detail or actual experience with that product, people were assuming that, one, it was going to cost the same as what competing online products do. Therefore, it's going to, be kind of a direct competitor. And two, based on Nintendo's history of doing online gaming, that it wasn't going to be a very good experience. So I saw almost immediately kind of this really big critical pan of that announcement from Nintendo saying we're going to be doing online, gaming, of course, with the Switch, but it's going to cost you money. Well, since then, more information has trickled out that has really proven all of those original articles and opinion pieces wrong. It sounds like the online component's only going to be about $30 a year. And furthermore, we've gotten more information about how the online gameplay is going to work and how the whole voice chat thing's going to work and what the details are around that retro game that you get every month. And that really just goes to show that when you read these opinion pieces, yes, you have this thirst for knowledge and you want to fill in all the gaps. You want to know as much as you can, as soon as you can. You really need to take everything with a grain of salt. You really need to try and seek out multiple sources for that information and also keep everything in perspective. Remember that information is just basically guesses, extrapolation based on past history and what that individual person's own experience and bias and everything may be. There's still a lot of information you don't know. You're just getting a guess, really, as to what they're trying to convey. Another quick example before we wrap this up. I did a blog piece, a podcast episode a while back about wondering if Apple is kind of trying to kill or spin off or just get rid of its creative professional market. How Apple hadn't come out with new Macs in a while, and the new MacBook Pros that had been released recently, around the time that I did that episode, really were seemingly unfulfilling to creative professionals, didn't offer enough power and RAM and all that. And a lot of people said the same thing. And a lot of opinion pieces said, well, these machines aren't going to sell very well to creative pros, or they're too expensive, or whatever. That Apple's basically trying to kill the Mac market. Well, We recently learned that Apple actually sold a ton of those machines. They actually sold very, very well. And it turns out a lot of creative pros did adopt them because they simply wanted a new machine. They wanted something that was thinner and lighter. And yeah, there are downsides to those computers, no doubt. I mean, the RAM thing is something that bit people. The reduction in battery life is something that has bitten people. But for the most part, people seem to have taken to those machines very well. So that's just another example that kind of goes to show, the internet is an echo chamber. And if a lot of people are saying the same thing, traditionally in real life, you would want to heed that advice. If a bunch of people tell you that a thing sucks, you probably want to listen to them. But on the internet, a lot of times when people say something sucks or offer an opinion like that, it's just because they're repeating somebody else's opinion, because they're trying to get information out there too. So if there's any bit of advice that I can offer you when you're on these sorts of sites, and even with my own podcast episodes, just try to keep an open mind. Don't necessarily buy in immediately to what you're reading or hearing or seeing. Just take it as a case in point that you may need to do further homework on your own, unless they're presenting actual factual information. They've got the hard numbers, the quotes, the press releases, the interviews to back up what they're trying to say. Like with these podcasts, I'm really just trying to give you food for thought. I'm happy to be wrong when I try to present information, and I'm just trying to give you one angle from stuff. And I think you all really recognize that, and I thank you for that. So take that attitude, that knowledge, that mental activity on your part, and just apply it to pretty much everything else you see and read on the internet, because it still is very much the Wild West, and it's an echo chamber. And you can definitely be heading down the wrong path if you just blindly buy into it. So with that, I am always soliciting suggestions for future topics. So if you want to leave those down in the comments below, or hit me up on something like Instagram or Twitter, that's always awesome. Of course, I am always looking for feedback on this topic. What do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you have another way to look at it? A counterpoint? Go for it. Just be nice down in the comments as well. If you liked the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.